Thank you, FeedSpot, for selecting this podcast channel under the category of the 60 Best Women in STEM podcasts, where this channel has been chosen from thousands of others on the web. As a part of the compilation of worthwhile podcast channels to listen to in 2023, thank you, FeedSpot, again for giving this honor, and thank you, the listener, for taking the time out of your day to listen to these episodes on Arnis News. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Arna Sahu, host of Arnis News, and if you are a newcomer, welcome to this channel. I give you warm greetings digitally. Today, we are with a special guest, Miss Elizabeth Daggert. As the interim head of engineering at Procore Technologies, prior vice president of engineering at GuideSpark, and prior director of engineering at Ericsson, Ms. Daggert has been able to propel her career through key qualities, which is leading her teams through a sense of continuous improvement and accountability. Providing clarity to others, she embraces the ideal mentality towards organizations and technologies, that is, a growth mindset. Through these qualities that she possesses and teaches others to keep as well, she's been able to be a part of countless innovative solutions, including helping design and launch an autonomous microgravity centrifuge experiment that flew on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. And if that isn't cool enough, she's been able to bring in 9 brand new products and 7 additional releases of new versions through existing product lines. So with that said, if you are here again, thank you for clicking back to this podcast episode, and be sure to come back to this channel very soon for a newer one. So thank you so much, Miss Elizabeth, for being here today. Before we start with the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Arna. I'm happy to be here. And feel free to call me Beth. That's what all my friends do. So that's completely fine. So yes, I'm Beth Daggert. I have been doing technology for a very long time, pretty much centered around computer work and software development. Started off, I guess I have my background. I just dropped that out there. I got my degree back, as you mentioned, with the centrifuge experiment. And so my degree was in aerospace engineering. Went to the University of Washington back when. Had some fun with that, but won a computer game programming contest back in the day. And that led me into a decade working in the computer games industry. I had my own company there for a little while, and then proceeded to work for a variety of different companies, including Microsoft, Ericsson, and the ones you listed. Currently heading up engineering at Procore. And gosh, what else about me? I've worn a lot of hats during that time. Been in and out, managed people, written a lot of code, worked as a game designer, did a little bit of product work. I think the biggest thing that I would say in terms of career path, the through line there, is I've always been very focused around customer outcomes. For me, what matters is making sure that I'm building a product that is actually going to have an impact on people, and I would like to think make their lives better in some fashion.
That's really cool. I'm really interested in like how you went from gaming design to all of these different places. And yeah, that actually leads to my next question, which is tell us a bit about your career path.
Well, I'd like to say it's a little bit of a random walk because, yeah, I've done a bunch of different things. So career path wise, always been interested in computers. I guess when I think back on it, I'm old enough that I grew up in a world where not everybody had computers. Personal computers became a thing in the early 1980s. And so I ran into my very first computer like when I was 12 years old. There just never had opportunity to even find one before then. It's not like people had, cell phones and things. And I was totally enamored that there was this box that I could use to tell stories to my friends. So it became a thing. I learned to start programming just on my own on these little computers, did that all through high school, wrote games for my friends. And that's part of what set it up. And after college led me into that. And I was very proud. It was back in the days of shipping software. You actually put games on the store shelves, and I got a game on a store shelf with my name on it. And it was really exciting. And during that time, then I got to I switched over from writing code to being a game designer, and did a lot of work just with writers and artists and all sorts of big production stuff. And that was entertaining. Ultimately ended up going to work for George Lucas, actually, and spent a few years working on Star Wars products. And they're also writing code, starting to lead people, learning how to manage. And I think that's sort of the transition over time for me was I kept going in and out of writing code in different products, whether it was ultimately on DVDs or like at Microsoft. When I went there, it was about, learning to work with a large organization. I couldn't imagine how you'd have more than like 30 people on a title. And suddenly at Microsoft, was working with 2,000 people on the Windows operating system and learning what that looked like and how to build bigger things at scale that could impact millions of people. And that got me excited. And somewhere in there, I made a transition, really at Microsoft, I think, where I realized that I was kind of limited by how much code that my own fingers could write. And if I really wanted to do more, I had to learn how to organize those people and work with them and work with teams to build bigger and better things. And I really started to make a very conscious shift from what I could do and the code that I could write and impact to working through those teams and leading them to the point now where a few jobs later, I'm running a group of 600 engineers and leading them to make big changes in the construction industry.
That's so cool. Like, as someone who's like really interested in computer science, like I'm kind of fangirling over everything. So that's really, really cool. My next question actually is, what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Well, the best advice I ever received was, I'm going to paraphrase it here, but you own your own career. It was something that I didn't realize for a long time. I think I was very much in a mode, like when you're in school or university even, you have classes and there's like this program set out in front of you and you have certain assignments and you deliver the assignments and you get your grades and then you can set your target on whatever degree and you can go out and get that degree, but you're following a program. And early in your career, it kind of works the same, I think. You're handed a lot of work. You develop, your first years of your career are really just about, especially in a technology field, are just about gaining depth in that field. In computer science, it's about learning various techniques and technologies and how to apply them. But at a certain point, you have to really, if you want to progress, it's less about what you're being handed, and it's more about learning to identify problems and solve them without direction and decide what kind of opportunities you want to take on for yourself. And that was a big transition for me. I hit at this point, and it was literally in my mid 30s where I couldn't figure out like why my career wasn't going anywhere. And someone who was my age, who actually that had known from the games industry, and we were working at the same place many years later outside the games industry, and he was way further up the career ladder than I was. And I just had a lunch conversation with him essentially. I said, what did you do? How did you do this? How can I like learn and do what you're doing? And he just looked at me like I was dumb. And he said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have to figure it out for yourself. And essentially we had a conversation that was, you own your own career. You need to be intentional about looking a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, and deciding what the target is and learning what you need to learn to get there and taking on the tasks you need to take on to get there. And don't assume anyone's just going to hand it to you, because they won't after a certain point.
Okay, yeah. This also this question leads to my next one, which is, what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Oh, there's probably a few of those. Well, coming at it as a woman in technology, and especially in computers, I think the biggest one that I continuously work to debunk is that it's a field of socially inept men. And it is, and it's not for women. There's like, I feel like there's still a lot of that baggage out there. There certainly was for most of my career. Hopefully it's getting better because there's more people like me around that are pushing a different narrative. But it's really not. There are so many places in computing that are not about that are not just guys who don't know how to put two words together and that are misogynistic or whatever. It's not. There's all this great application and of technology towards social good and change and environmental cleanups and just anything that you can think of. And and small applications as well, just women writing apps, founding their own companies, being leaders, being deep technologists. Yeah, we're underrepresented still. It's not 50-50 totally. But my last two organizations before Procore, I got both of those organizations to be over a third women, writing code, managing, leading, doing all kinds of stuff. And it took work, but there were plenty of us there. So I'm working on doing that again in the current role and trying to build up the numbers. So yeah, I would encourage, especially women in particular, don't think that this is like a field that you're not supposed to go into and it's just for guys.
Yeah. Another segue to my next question is, if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Oh, goodness. Tell you what, I'll give you three different questions and then you can ask any one of them or more that you want. So here's the three questions I would hand you. One, why did you go into management instead of doing something else? Two, where did I take my biggest career risk? Or three, what am I the most proud of?
Probably the first one.
Okay, well, so that question, why did I go into technology management instead of maybe doing something else? Well, one of the things that I've discovered along the way, again, talking about women in technology and specifically in computing, there are, there's an input problem. Like I said, I don't think we have enough women in the field to be proportional, and I would like to see that. And a lot of people focus on changing that by encouraging women in school, programs to recruit them into computer science, programs to recruit them into the field after university. That's the input side of the funnel, and that's great. But something else tends to happen. Lots of women have children. Lots of women get into their 30s, certainly, start families, have other priorities. And there are plenty of cases where they step away. They have to step away for years at a time. And sometimes they don't come back, or they just get into it. And for a variety of reasons, maybe they just don't see the opportunities for them. And it's unfortunate. And so there's a real drop off that happens, especially to women in computer science and in that field, and in the 30s, I would say. And I went through the same thing. There was a real strong point for me at that point in time where I thought about leaving and not coming back. And I looked and I didn't see a lot of women leaders in senior roles. And I didn't see a lot of women succeeding and getting further than I had. And I realized that if I dropped out or if I changed what I was doing, which I could have done, I wasn't going to be building a path for anyone else to follow. And so for me, a big chunk of staying in it, pushing through, blazing trails where I needed to, has been about creating a path for others that I can help reach down and pull up behind, and in a way, pay it forward to build and become part of the future I want to see out there in this field. So it certainly had its challenges. And at the time, I thought I was crazy, but I'm enjoying it at this point.
Yeah. Could you answer the second question as well?
Yeah, the biggest career risk?
Yeah.
I'm happy to. So in my 20s, back when I was in the computer games industry, I started my own company. And that was, I walked out of the second little computer game studio that I had ever worked for. I was 26 years old and I just quit. I was fed up. I was burned out and I thought I could do it better than everybody else. So I had a little bit of ego there. But I didn't have a lot of money in the bank and just went for it. And I knew a few people that were willing to partner with me. And we put together a little studio. And for about 2 years, kept the doors open, kept money coming in. I never starved, never got investment. We managed to keep it rolling for a while. But it was a huge risk because there was no safety net. And I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never run a business. I had no training. I didn't have an MBA. I'd done nothing like that. No connections. I just had a dream for what we could build together and what I wanted to see happen. And what the heck, just went for it. And it was a real learning experience. And every single month was terrifying. But I came out the other side of that, even though the business didn't succeed, right? 2 years later, we had to close it up. But the thing about that was that could be looked at as a failure, But I learned so much through that experience in terms of what I was capable of, and the fact that I could wear a lot of different hats and in a lot of different areas on the business side, the product side, the networking side, the uh, technology development side, that I would never have had the opportunity to do before. So even though it wasn't a financial reward, I think it really was a huge learning opportunity, and it really influenced some of the things that I was willing to take on risks for later. Like I was just saying, stepping up and pushing through, knowing that I could lead and learn to manage and drive into a place that I had never really tried to be before. It's like, well, it isn't the scariest thing I've ever done, right? So when I took that move later in my 30s, I kind of had that from the bigger, scary experience in my 20s.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the things that we do, they might turn out as failures, but there's like a little bit of an understanding behind them. Like that's what my
Mhm.
parents say. Like regardless of whatever happens, there's like probably like a lesson or a fruit behind that. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's just a big like morale to think. So my next question is, what are the best resources that have helped you find your career?
Number one is other people. I cannot overstate at all the value of networking, finding sponsors, finding mentors, finding coaches, finding peers, just people with whom you can build relationships and be able to talk to them openly about your challenges, about what you want, to be able to reflect, have them call you out, because we all get trapped on our own mental cages. We don't necessarily see the opportunities that are around us. And those folks can hold us accountable and building. And when we have those relationships that we build up, they can read back things we've said to them. They can say, hey, we've been meeting with each other for a year and you said you wanted to go and do this and you still haven't done it. What's going on? Or they can just know it because you've been talking to them about something you want to do. If an opportunity comes up that they see that you're not around for, they might be able to give you a call or hook you up, right? So those things, just being unafraid to go ask anybody a dumb question, and being humble and coming in, being willing to learn and willing to teach, those are that building that network and having those relationships is the single most important thing I can think of in terms of finding, developing, sustaining, growing a career.
Yeah, because like people, they're like real people who've done things before and they can give their experiences off to you. So
Mhm.
that's really, really important too. Since we have a little bit more time left, a question that I want to ask you is, what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
Well, I'm going to hinge off my last answer and say networking, 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 because it is actually a job in a way to really. I'm an introvert. And you might not, people
Yeah.
might not believe it. I was president of the drama club. I am like stand up on stage all the time in front of 600 people these days. I'm going to be standing up in front of thousands in a few weeks. And I love being on stage, but that's not really the thing. Um, what it really is like going out and meeting people and pressing the flesh and building those relationships. It takes effort for someone like me. It costs me energy. I have to like put myself into that mode. It can be a little scary to do it, especially when I hadn't built up kind of just getting used to it and the skills. And it's my biggest regret in some ways. I wish I had like could go back in time and tell myself, spend energy in college working on your network, spend energy in your early 20s working on your network, actually sit down just like you would study a book, figure out how you invest an hour a week, 10 hours a quarter, whatever it is. What activities are you going to do? I just ignored it. I assumed I didn't know. I was just dumb. I was ignorant, I guess. I shouldn't say dumb, but nobody gave me that advice. And I, it didn't help my career not to have that. And once I started actually focusing on it in my 30s a little more, that's when things started to happen for me in a real way. So, if I could go back and change it, it would be that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an introvert as well, so sometimes it takes up a lot of energy just like talking
Mhm.
to people. So I totally get what you mean. Yeah. And then another question I want to ask is, how do you continue to learn in order to stay on top of things within your role?
Well, this is an interesting one because there's lots of things that I would say that or anybody could do, right? That you go to conferences in areas that you care about and learn lots of topics that way. There's lots of great websites. YouTube's a fantastic resource these days. You can get lost down the rabbit hole of people. There's a video and a half for everything. Um, Plenty of books, all the rest of it. Again, asking other people, like through that whole networking thing. But one of the ones that's for me been the one that I followed is trying new hats on. Like I've just not been afraid to do it. And then like when I talk about, well, when you have your own company and it's a small company, or you're working in a startup, say, where it's not that many people, there's a lot of flexibility for being and doing other things that are outside of what you would think of as your role. You may not have all the product definition you need to implement something. So you got to go talk to the customer. You got to, figure things out. Well, that's kind of a product person's job, but in a small company, or if you're doing it for yourself, no one else is going to necessarily do that for you. Right. So being forced into situations, taking on jobs that are ill-defined and full of ambiguity, those actually present large opportunities to get forced out of comfort zones and into places that where you have to learn in order to achieve and move forward. And I actually find that to be the best way of all. It's like if I'm forced out of my comfort zone and it's like I don't know what I need to do next to move ahead, I'm going to by definition learn, and I have to. And then it's not like I don't get to be lazy. So I kind of like to have that external driving force that's behind me. And I'm a curious person by nature. I think that helps. But when you jump into a circumstance that's going to force you to continuously learn, you don't have a choice around it. And that's useful for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have first-hand experience with like moving positions, but I kind of do know that external driving force. In my case, it was pressure because I came from like a really like difficult school. So what made me want to learn more was like I guess pressure, but it made me more curious with learning. So yeah, I kind of get that. And then my last question is, what do you think is the vital factor that shaped your career, and what was your career before learning it and after learning it?
Well, I think I'm going to hop pretty much back to the start of what we talked about, because that conversation that I had with that old colleague of mine, where he told me, I'm not going to give you your career, you have to own your own career, completely changed my mindset. The perspective of really being intentional about what do I want to be known for? What do I want to spend my time doing? Because we all have limited time in this life. And getting like a real sense of, oh, it shouldn't just let it happen to me. I should take charge of it. Before then, I followed the path that was more or less in front of me. Yeah, I was excited. I tried some things like did, and it was, and I achieved a lot, but it wasn't necessarily intentional. In some ways, it was just like doing the next obvious thing or the assignment at hand. It's an entirely different thing for me to stand back and say, no, I want to be an example. I want to create a path for other women to follow. I want to stand on a stage someday and lead an organization and drive a vision and rally through with a group of thousands of people to do something bigger than any of us could have done alone. To take on that as a vision, to take your career and look at it as a vision for where you want to go, that is the inflection for me that completely changed me from just being in the trench day to day to actually setting out to have a career of meaning and impact.
Yeah, I mean, those affirmations, they can like really channel you to do something. And since like it's a huge thing about like being positive and having those like words being able to express themselves. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay, so thus that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. Check out Miss Bet's LinkedIn page, which I will mention in the description for more information, and make sure to come back to the channel for very soon for a new episode. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Arna Sahu, the host of Arna's News. Peace out. See you soon. Toodles.